does is he says, I lay down my life. He, in essence, says that I'm going to do more than just merely risk my life. He says, but I am going to do this on behalf of the sheep. And the way that we pick that up is that you have to look in verse number 11 when he says he lays down his life. The word for is huper in the Greek, which means on behalf of. He is in essence saying that I am laying my life down, and it gives us this idea of a substitutional death, which points us to Calvary, where we know that Jesus died on behalf of the sinner. So what we now understand is that this sacrifice that he is making, it is significant because when he says, I lay down my life, he is contrasting himself with these who are bad shepherds in verses 12 and 13. He says, he who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and he is not concerned about the sheep. Jesus, in essence, says, rather than me fleeing, I am faithful to the sheep, so that I am so faithful that I will do what it takes to protect them. Mind you that these sheep are now of his fold. He is in essence saying, because I am the door, they've made the exit out of Judaism. They've made the entrance into me. And now since they are in me, I'm not going to lose any of them. So it doesn't matter how the enemy tries to come. I'm going to lay down my life because I am going to give them the security that they need. Now, if this is not a clear representation of the depth of the love that the shepherd has for the sheep, now what we have to do is be careful of imposing our own hermeneutic on this text. We cannot use this and try to place us now the pastor of a congregation in this text. This is not what it's talking about. Though it uses the Greek word poimen for shepherd, he is not referring to the person who is the leader of a congregation. But Jesus is saying that I am significantly different from anything else that you've seen. I'm unique in being the good shepherd. He says every shepherd that came prior to me, those who were good shepherds were only representations or foreshadowings of who I would be. He says they couldn't do what I am doing. He says, I lay down my life for the sheep. He sharpens this because he wants them to know that the false shepherd or the imitation shepherd, the bad shepherd, he's only doing what he does because he is getting paid for it. He is saying, but it's not just because that they're getting paid. They're only doing it for that. He says they are not even concerned, because he says in verse number 13, they are not concerned for the sheep. The good shepherd says, I am so concerned, I am so compassionate, I am so caring that I'm willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect the sheep. I don't know about you, but I'm delighted to know that the shepherd that we have is a shepherd who will protect. But contextually, we have to read this. When he says this, he is referencing, when he talks about this, and I am the good shepherd and I lay down my life for the sheep. He is talking about specifically, contextually, the Jews. But now we go to verse number 14. He says, I am the good shepherd and I know my own and my own know me. Now he uses this idea where we see the linkage with the sheep. He is in essence, when he uses this word know, it's the word in the Greek that suggests intimacy. It's the word in the Greek that would suggest the intimate relationship of a man and a woman. It's the relationship that would suggest that we are so closely knitted together that I know you and you know me. And then he goes down in verse 15 and uses the parallel where it says, even as the Father knows me and I know the Father and I lay down my life for the sheep. He is in essence saying, I need you to understand the depth of my linkage to you. We are in a real, genuine, authentic relationship because I have chosen you to be my sheep. He says, and because we are in relationship, I know you. I know you intimately. You know me intimately. Now, if you go back to the Eastern culture, what would happen is the shepherds would have approximately maybe 100 sheep. And they would have names for them, and they knew every name of each one of those which were theirs. In essence, if they would call him whatever by his name, or whatever that sheep was by her name, they would come because they knew that shepherd's voice. And that shepherd would not get those sheep to move if they were not of his fold. So what he suggests to us is that because of our relationship, I will never leave you. He shows us, and he shows us in the text as being their good shepherd. He says, I am not the owner of the sheep, but I have been given charge of the sheep because of my mediatorial office. He says, I am on behalf the leader of these sheep because my Father has placed me in charge of them. And he says, the only time that I've ever left them, I did not leave them by themselves. He says, when I took them and I sent them into the sheepfold, he in essence says, when I left them myself, they were not left, because it gives us the indication of pneumatology of the Holy Spirit. He says, then the doorkeeper, who was the Holy Spirit, he was there to protect them. That's why you have to understand when you read in John, when Jesus says, if I do not leave, the Comforter cannot come. The text is filled with theology and doctrine that if you would just look at it carefully, he says, I am connected to you like you would never imagine. He says, I am so closely linked in with you that I know you. And a shepherd would know whatever was going on with the sheep. Now, in order for the shepherd to know them and for the sheep to know their shepherd, they had to be in close contact and relationship on a consistent basis. Not only would they know his voice, but they could smell his scent. Not only would they know this, but they would smell the scent. Back home in Alabama, when my daddy had cows on the field, I noticed something about my dad when he would go in the field. He had all these heads of cattle. And what he would do is he would start to make this call, and they would start coming to him. I tried to do the same thing, but they never moved. And I watched my daddy go to the same field with the same cows, and he would make the same noise that I would make, but they would start rushing towards him. And I said, Daddy, how is it that they will come to your voice? He says, son, they know my voice because I'm consistently out here with them. Jesus says, my sheep know my voice, I know them, and they know me. But now he says, then we see him being a good shepherd based on the fact of his leadership of the sheep.